This recording is the second of two that serve as an overview of the OneCore Core Transact setup and configuration. Now that we've covered the base configuration, we can commence to the financial product creation. So from the area page, we can navigate to the product list page. And your list page really details all the products that are either in the process of being defined or have been created. So you'll note under the maintenance menu, if I can just draw your attention to this area, that the menu items that one can edit, delete, activate, expire, or duplicate an existing product. So once a product has been activated, one can no longer edit the parameters within. So if there are corrections, we typically duplicate the product to form a new template and then make the necessary changes from there on forward. I think this process is vitally important from a controls point of view, because when we create a contract, it inherits information from the chosen product. If the product keeps changing, then it's extremely difficult to verify why certain contracts why certain contracts with the same products have different settings. So before we go any further, it's important to describe the purpose of a financial product. So the product is a template, or better said, actually a framework within which one defines the available values for selection at point of contracting. So for example, we may want to define that the product only has a monthly repayment frequency, and if so, then this will be the only option available to when one contracts. Similarly, if this product permits other frequencies, then these will be defined and they'll be available for selection at contracting. So if I go in and I choose a particular product, I'm going to use the 10-year AgriCapex multi-disperse product. Now this is the actual product card, and I'd like to draw your attention to the product header. Now on the product header, we are capturing some general product information, including the product group, the type of associated rule set, that we spoke about earlier in our first recording, and then some other product-related behavior relating to activation and settlements. On the Advanced Fast tab, I'm going to navigate further down. The product may be defined as a list, so you'll note here it's configured as a min-max. Currently, we may choose to edit this particular contract. We could choose a explicit list. Within this list, you can define explicit loan amounts, or alternatively, if you didn't want to do a list, we could keep this as a min-max. And here, what we could do is we could define an explicit range. And this range is where the customers would obviously choose any value that falls within the minimum and maximum value. So we're really governing what is allowed at point of contracting. So we would then define if the product will only allow for a single disbursement or if multiple disbursements are allowed. And if the multiple disbursement indicator is set for a term loan, then one will be able to disperse in several iterations up to the loan amount. So once the funds are dispersed, then the payments will not free up any capital for subsequent disbursements. This differs though to revolving credit. Revolving credit, on the other hand, one will be able to disperse up in several iterations up to the loan amount, and any payments made thereafter will free up capital. In fact, at any point will free up capital for subsequent disbursements and drawdown. And then finally, the disbursements group that we spoke about earlier. In this particular instance, we've allocated two types of disbursement groups, is Farm 1 and Farm 2. So at point of contracting, you will have, as a customer, you'll have the option to choose for this particular product what disbursement agreement you are happy to contract to us with. So now I want to quickly step through the recoupment section. It's an extremely high-level view, but this is where we define the pay plan settings. So we define the plan, whether the plan can be in arrears or in advance, or give the customer the choice of either or both. So all the way down to testing the period or defining the periodicity. In this particular case, we've defined that this product is only good for a monthly or quarterly pay plan regime. One last point I want to just mention on the product setup is obviously the charges associated with the product. So if I go to product and charge model, here what you're viewing is are the charges that have been associated with this financial product. I'll touch on it briefly, but the first line represents a interest charge. And you'll note here that it's triggered to occur on a frequency. We have several options. This could be defined to occur on a particular event, a frequency. Alternatively, it could be waiting for another charge to occur before it triggers. So that we refer to as spawning, as I mentioned in my previous recording. Because this is a frequency trigger, we then define when it will happen, and this one is occurring on the last day of every month. We then also have the ability to define if this is a fixed value or if it needs to be based on a calculation. In this case, it's a calculation. We can define whether it will occur in arrears, and if there's a minimum balance threshold, so meaning that once you breach that threshold, this charge no longer applies or will accrue. For that particular charge, we have in the bottom pane here each one of its prices, and you'll note that for a particular date range we have this charge calculation setup defined, and you'll recognize this from the first. If I just hover over that, you'll see that the actual calculation applied to this charge is the one where we defined it as unsecured interest, and the formula to apply is the contract balance. If the contract balance is greater than 0, then apply a repo plus 20%, otherwise it's 0. So remember, it was if there's a credit balance on this particular contract, for this contract, then don't apply any interest rate, otherwise you apply the former.